News Kefi.
All right, everyone, let's get into a conversation. This year, Nigeria is celebrating 26 years of constitutional governance. And to mark this year's Democracy Day, President Bola Tinubu, while addressing a joint session of the National Assembly, bestowed national awards on living and past Nigerians who fought for democracy for the country. He also seized the opportunity to emphasize that Nigeria will not slip into a one-party state under his watch. But with all the gains we have recorded for the past 26 years, what is the state of democracy in Nigeria? This is still the big question out there. Now, let's now get the perspective of a professor of politics, political institutions and comparative politics, Usmanu Danfodio University, Professor Yaya Tanko Baba, who joins us virtually. Good evening to you, Prof. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Right. You know, in the last 4 days, some of the questions we've asked are, to what extent have Nigeria's political institutions maintained independence and accountability? And we've also assessed inter-institutional relations, particularly the executive legislature dynamic over the past 2 decades. So my first question to you tonight is, what does 26 years of uninterrupted constitutional democracy mean for Nigeria?
Well, it means quite a lot for Nigeria. For the first time, Nigeria had actually experienced unbroken democracy, uninterrupted democratic governance, and that is a breakaway. The jinx has been broken in terms of military interregnum and military intervention in politics. It's a declaration, that democracy has come to stay in Nigeria, and that the principles of democracy have been, to a very large extent, internalized. The mass of the people, the elites, all stakeholders in Nigeria have come to appreciate the value of democracy as a framework of governance. To also understand that there is no alternative to democracy, and this is the message. That explains why celebrations greeted everywhere, every part of the country. Particularly those in government, at national level, at sub-national level, celebrations all over that democracy has come to stay. And this is a ritual, year in, year out. We celebrate this very particular important milestone in Nigeria's political development, in Nigeria's democratic process, democratic development. And of course, but there is quite a huge difference between democracy in form and democracy in substance. And that is where the mystery lies. Whether or not democratic governance in Nigeria or constitutional government in Nigeria have actually, or is on the track of yielding the expected results. Democracy is a framework of governance that is meant to achieve certain important milestone in human development. It is labeled as the most preferred framework of governance because it is considered to be the best framework that facilitates human development, that guarantees the security and the fundamental rights of individuals. It's a framework of governance that also guarantees accountability of the governance to the government, transparency in government, rule of law, which of course is about the entrenchment of fundamental human rights of the citizenry, and it's the only framework that guarantees participation of the mass of the people in the way in which they are governed. That usually it sums up the beauty of democracy. But I think in the last 2.5 decades, or even more, lots of questions are asked as to whether or not Nigeria's return to democracy have actually achieved, or if on the track of achieving, these important, principles of democracy. Whether we are on the track of institutionalizing practices and processes of democracy that could lead to the entrenchment of fundamental rights or the respect and protection of people's rights, so to say. Whether or not democracy that we have had in the last 2.5 decades have actually transformed the livelihood of the people for good. Whether or not the Nigerian people have actually are secured in terms of government investment in their security of lives and property, whether or not democracy has also contributed to peaceful coexistence.
Right,
Trust
Prof.
and
And I mean, tonight you would also help us in answering this question. But because questions rather, but because you've said there is no alternative to democracy, how then would you assess the evolution of Nigeria's fourth republic since 1999? For you, what were the most significant institutional reforms or milestones achieved in the last 26 years of democratic rule?
It's quite difficult to say straightforward that this a clear achievement, but I will want to want to explain this context, these developments in a context. I would rather say that what the country has experienced in the first decade of the country's return to democracy has been marvelous. In the first 10 years of Nigeria's democracy, we have witnessed, development in the institutions of democracy. Strangely, I will tell you that the legislature in the first 10 years of democracy was stronger, more independent, and assertive, and contributed to governance far more, progressively than in the last 16 years. The last 16 years. I will tell you that the judiciary was more independent and assertive in the first 10 years of democracy than now. I will tell you that we have had more vibrant civil society organizations in the first 10 years of Nigeria's democracy than now. And I will tell you that, of course, the only significant, achievement I can point to what has happened in the last 16 years of democracy was the transformation that has actually taken place in Nigeria's electoral system. We have the Nigerian electoral system blossom. It has evolved, and such evolution had actually transformed Nigeria's democracy in ways that most Nigerians least expected, meaning that the electoral system had become more strengthened than ever before. The confidence and the trust in the electoral system in the last 16 years was more visible than in the first 10 years of democracy. Otherwise, I will tell you that the energy, the resources, the time Nigerians have invested in the struggle for democracy, in the activism for the return to democracy, have not been commensurate. And there has not been commensurate investment in terms of energy resources and commitment of the Nigerian people in the sustenance and in the consolidation and sustenance of democracy. Meaning that we have taken it for granted. That democracy as a form of government, when installed, guarantees its institutionalization. And the case is never, that is never the case. Democracy is a continuous process, and that is its advocacy, the activism towards deepening democracy is even harder than installing it. I will give you a few instances, and examples. Now, the political parties are regarded as the bedrock and the foundations of democracy. And today, what we are witnessing in Nigeria's democratic space is the gradual death in the strength of political parties as the building blocks of democracy. We have had, or we are experiencing, near collapse of opposition parties in Nigeria today. And I tell you that the beauty of democracy is that it is bi or multi-party, it is competitive, and that opposition parties create a distinction between representative democracy and one-party state democracy that obtains in a socialist climate. So Nigeria's gradual drift towards one-party system in the last few years, as we are witnessing today, with the death of the major opposition party in the country, PDP, and of course the collapse of other, smaller parties in the country, is actually drifting Nigeria into a crisis of democratic governance. And this is a huge crisis at hand. And Nigerian people, the Nigerian elite, must actually rise to the occasion.
All right.
If this, Yeah.
Right. I get you, Prof. And I must say that I agree with you when you say our democratic institutions are stronger. But has Nigeria's political elite evolved since the return to democracy? Or are we still recycling the same leadership culture? Do you believe that Nigeria has truly transitioned to a people-driven democracy? Or are we still in an elite-controlled system? What do you say, Prof?
Yeah, I think democracy has that very particular feature of elite based. Everywhere in the world is democracy, even when it is termed as people of government of the people, for the people, or by the people. Even in the United States of America, even in Great Britain, the oldest democracy in the world, the system of government has always been elite centered. But the big difference that exists between this developed and, and advanced democracies and emerging and broader democracy like ours is that is the character of the elite. The elites in those parts of the world have consensus about the future of their country, about the development of their country, about their resolve for the stability, security, and prosperity of their country. This is lacking in Nigeria. Even when elites compete for power, for seat among themselves across different political parties in advanced democracies, such competition is actually targeted towards a particular national objective. And such national objectives are articulated, and the elite are united. And the consensus of the elite about the future of the country and the objective, the national objective of the country, is not compromised. But in countries like ours, the elite do not seem to have consensus about the future of the country. They don't seem to take the project of the country, the Nigerian project, as a unifying force. What they pursue are largely, group and individualistic, if you like, interest, even at the expense of the country. And that is why we think that the elitist nature of democracy in the country, in Nigeria, for instance, is a dangerous trend. So, not because elite control of democracy is harmful, but because the focus of the elite in the country is not about the future of the country, but is centered around individuals and groups. And this is the dangerous trend the Nigerian state is actually drifting. There seems to be no consensus among the elite about Nigeria, about the future of Nigeria, about the destiny of Nigeria, about the prospects of Nigeria, about how Nigeria should evolve under whatever political platform, or regardless of whichever political party is in power. You can see the American project, for instance, regardless of whether Republican or Democrats are in power, the American project continues.
And also, Prof, it is also about the unity of the country. And that would lead me to my next question. Do you believe successive governments have done enough to, promote national unity and healing, especially in the post-June 12 Nigeria? And I ask because I know you would agree with me, Prof, that the 2023 general elections were meant to, be a moment of democratic maturity, a chance for Nigeria to consolidate its electoral process and deepen national unity. Instead, they exposed and in many ways intensified the very fault lines we've spent decades trying to mend. You look at ethnic, religious, and regional divisions, and much of this division can be laid at the feet of the political class. Prof.
Yeah, I think that takes me still back to my earlier argument, that because of that lack of consensus among the elites about the future of the country, the elites take refuge, most often, around religion, around religions, around ethnicity, around tribe, around, parochial, sentiments and sometimes emotions to garner support. Because there seems not to be, among themselves, articulated, national objective within which, parties individuals, groups, formations, and coalitions can rally around. If you have articulated national objectives, all parties can key into that to develop strategies towards achieving those national objectives. But because there is none, and the elites have not at any time, sat back to say that the Nigerian state needs a clear, even when the constitution is very clear about the objective of the Nigerian state. Yet again, the crisis with the Nigerian elite, the division that exists within the Nigerian elite, have actually affected the articulation of the. So what happens? The outcome or the implications of this have been that ethnicity, religion, tribe, even sex have now become platforms for political mobilization. And because of that, it deepens division amongst the people of the country. And therefore, the extent, the nature of patriotism amongst the Nigerian people is now undermined because the elites do not seem to evoke, so to say, such national sentiments. And therefore, ethnic, religious, tribal, sectional, regional sentiments now drive political mobilization and political process. And this constitutes a huge challenge for democratic development,
Right.
for national unity, and for the development of the country as one indivisible nation.
Right, so Prof, how then can we foster greater unity, while respecting this diversity?
This diversity is a strength, ought to be a strength, just like the American diversity. America rules the world with its diversity, and such diversity has actually, afforded it the opportunity to rule the world. In the case of Nigeria, the diverse nature of the country has been abused, and that what we need to do is for the people of the country, bottom up, through the elite. And when I mean elite, I don't mean the political elite alone. Okay. Elites will include professional elites, will include occupational elites, will include important segments of society's community leaders, traditional leaders, religious leaders, and different segments of the society to come up with a project for Nigeria. And such a project should define the future of the country. Only this, can save Nigerian situation. And that such an articulated national objective or national vision, if you like, will now guide the elites to actually construct some sort of consensus among themselves. That whatever happens, this needs to be achieved.
But Prof, is it really realistic to leave this? Is it realistic for us as a country to leave this duty in the hands of the elites? So, I mean, the question I'm asking is, let me rephrase it. What reforms or leadership culture shifts are needed to, prevent this in 2027?
Yeah, I think that's what I said, bottom up. I think the civil society organizations have a lot to do in this respect. The professional platforms, groups that represent the diverse nature of the Nigerian public must actually be seen to come together, must have a resolve about the future of Nigeria. Such resolve should be articulated. The Nigerian elite themselves alone cannot hold the Nigerian state to ransom. If there is unity and consensus amongst the people through these diverse platforms of civil society organizations, of professional bodies, of community platforms, and other important representatives of the people can come together and evoke a strong platform that, could threaten the elites, so to say, threaten the elites in a way, to even evoke a drastic change, even in elections, to even want to vote an independent candidate, for instance, or to vote a party or a candidate, for instance, that is completely, outside of this recycled elite, is an important step to creating a project for Nigeria, a destiny for Nigeria, an objective, a national objective ambition for Nigeria. Mm. And this can be done only bottom up. The elites, the character of the Nigerian elite as it is today, is one that the elite are conspicuously self-centered. And their goal largely is to capture and retain power. And that's why, we have seen the complete near destruction of institutions in Nigeria. The judiciary, the legislature, important institutions of governance, of democratic governance in Nigeria today that are balkanized and bastardized. Imagine, judicial decisions are now political decisions. Mm-hmm. Even before cases are heard, you have opportunity to discuss what the outcomes are, and you can bargain the outcome of judicial decisions. This is dangerous for democracy. Today, whatever goes to National Assembly is said without even much debate. This is dangerous for democracy. We have the first 10 years of democracy.
Looking at it from other angles, does the Constitution adequately address the question of equitable representation across Nigeria's diverse regions?
Yeah, representation has always been on the basis of Nigeria's context. When I say fragments, on the basis of population, on the basis of equality, on the basis of states, and so on and so forth. And you could see the proportionate level of representation exists only in the House of Representatives, where population becomes the major determinant of representation of communities in the National Assembly. But that is not where the mystery lies. The major problem is what do representatives do when elected into office and into the important institution of democracy, the legislature? Do they invoke their powers to hold the executive accountable for their actions? Or are they committing themselves as appendages of the executive? Are they rubber stamping the fishes of the executive? That is where the problem is. And therefore, the character of people elected into the House of Representatives and the nature of abuse of power on the part of the executive to hand people of legislature to even intervene and interfere in the process of legislative decisions. Who emerge as leaders of the legislature has now become the business of the executive. You could see politicking all over. Inducement, financial inducement, threat, intimidation in the process of who emerged to become the Senate president or who becomes the Speaker of House of Representatives. That is where the independence and the autonomy of the legislature is lost in the first place.
But Prof,
and we want the media will watch. Yeah.
But Prof, do you believe
the media will watch? Yeah.
Do you believe that the principle of federal character as enshrined in the Constitution has been effectively implemented? Do you believe so?
Well, yeah, I think it's something that has now become.
Prof, are you there? Prof, are you there? Can you hear me?
When it was first conceived.
Okay. Prof,
it was meant
go ahead.
to ensure equity, fairness, equity. Yeah, it was meant to ensure equity and fairness of the diverse groups across the Nigerian state. And you could see political parties trying to replicate such principle in the way in which they fill in their candidates and they distribute positions of power and so on and so forth. Even then, it's not about the people, it's about the elites themselves. Who becomes what? It's not to give certain people the voice, but to actually get friends and colleagues around to be incorporated into a group that hold power and benefit themselves with the privileges of power. So I don't think the common man in Nigeria has anything to do with federal character, with the fairness with which federal character was initially conceived when it was enshrined in the 1979 Constitution and replicated in the 1999 Constitution as amended. So it's one principle that one provision of the Constitution that has now only become ritual, but it doesn't add any significant value in the way in which the country is governed. We can see even from the appointments of of people in office. You could see lopsidedness. The last regime, Buhari's government, had been accused of nepotism in terms of the choice of officials. This government is even producing a worst, record of accusation of favoritism and so on and so forth. So when you ask,
and that's debatable, Prof. Prof, and that's debatable because I know a lot of persons would not agree with you, right? But let's go on a break, Prof. Let's go on a break, and when we come back, we'll continue this conversation. Please stay with us, everyone. Welcome back to Politics Tonight, everyone. We're still celebrating Nigeria's 26 years of constitutional governance, and my guest tonight is Yaya Tanko Baba. He's a professor of political institutions and comparative politics at Usmanu Danfodiyo University, Sokoto State. Prof, thank you very much for staying with us on the program. Before we went on that break, I asked if the principle of federal character as enshrined in the Constitution has been effectively implemented. And I asked the question, which would also birth another question. Yes, the principle of federal character was designed to promote equity, unity, and balanced representation across Nigeria's diverse regions and groups. But what some Nigerians have said to me on this program, just as you've said, is that instead of fostering national integration, it has in some cases deepened a sense of exclusion or mediocrity when merit is sacrificed. And as we speak tonight, and because you have said to me before we went on break, let me quote you. You said, you do not think the common man in Nigeria has anything to do with federal character. So what role should state creation, resource control, or rotational leadership play in addressing these concerns?
I don't think these mechanisms of or strategy for political management. State creation will benefit the elites largely because it will create opportunities for different groups of people to become governors, to be elected into national state assemblies, to have access to state resources, and of course, you may argue that it will actually increase the prospect of extending development into different parts of the country. But then, even now, 36 states of Nigeria, 26 years of democracy. Look at the statistics: poverty profile, rate of unemployment, insecurity, corruption, misappropriation of national resources and assets. Take a look at this matrix and see how democracy is taking its own toll on the ordinary people, on the general public. So when you create more states, this might not, in any significant way, address that question of representation or question of fairness or equity in the way in which the Nigerian state is governed. What is most important is institutionalization of the principles of democracy, of accountability, of transparency, of probity, of prudence in the management of resources. As long as democracy in Nigeria does not guarantee accountability of the governors to the governed, of the rulers to the ruled, even if 100 states are created in Nigeria, the result and the outcome will still be the same. So I think these principles of democracy are what needed to be deepened, needed to be institutionalized, needed to be entrenched in the process of democracy and in the practice of democracy. If this is done, we are quite sufficient with 36 states in Nigeria. And that what we'll achieve in the prudent management of resources, what we'll achieve in the respect for the rule of law, what we will achieve in the institutions of democracy becoming strong, viral, and alive to their responsibilities will go a very long way.
All right.
In advancing, in protecting the interests of the Nigerian public, in promoting security, in advancing the welfare of the common man, in providing employment, in reducing poverty, in enhancing economic growth, in stabilizing the nation, in providing quality education to the people, in providing access to health care, providing basic and critical infrastructure for economic growth. This is what is important.
All right.
And state creation is an elite venture, if you like.
All right then. But Prof, before I let you go, 2 questions. What advice would you give Nigeria's current and future leaders about balancing national interests with democratic ideals? How can today's leaders draw lessons from the early post-independence years to build a more cohesive and democratic Nigeria?
Yeah, I think that was my earlier submission about the Nigerian project, about the national objective, about the national vision. This needs to be drawn. Clearly, there's need for Nigeria and for the Nigerian elite to strike a consensus about what Nigeria is and what the future of Nigeria should be. There should be a project called the Nigerian Project. And that project should be the rallying point of all Nigerians. And that project should be owned by all Nigerians.
Absolutely.
And the elite should, rally around this very particular project, national vision. And this national vision should transcend every government, every political party, every individual that they might. The crisis with the Nigerian democracy and the crisis with the Nigerian state is that no government seems to have focus towards national objectives.
Right.
You remember what has happened?
And I think we can also, thank you so much, Prof. Sadly, we're out of time. And I think we can also end this conversation with your final statement, which says that the task of building a stronger democratic Nigeria rests on us all. Thank you so much for joining us. Professor Yaya Tanko Baba is a professor of political institutions and comparative politics at Usmanu Danfodio University, Sokoto State. Thank you so much for your time on politics tonight. And please have a great weekend. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thank you very much for watching, everyone. That marks the end of today's episode of Politics Tonight. But before we go, let's tell you that the views and reactions of our resource persons are theirs and have no connection with TVC News. Meanwhile, you can watch the repeat broadcast of this episode at 12:30 a.m. Get in touch with us on our social media handles, Facebook, Instagram, and X at TVC News NG and at Olajumoke using the